All right, so we've gone over the basics of lighting, the basic properties of each of the, five simple kinds of lights. But I want to show you now some practical lighting stuff. Now, a couple of housekeeping things about this file, which will be up in the announcements area where the video is. First of all, I have everything on layers, including two different light sets. So I can turn these on and it will turn on different lighting schemes. When you start off, there will be two things that do not have, these two lights are not on a layer. And all of the things are on layers in part because we need to be able to, turn walls on and off, be able to see through things, etc. Another thing is that I do have the outliner open for this video. You would go to Windows Outliner if you do not have it open. It's a great way to select specific items. A lot of people basically live in this when they're working in these files, especially since you can tell the difference between a light and a piece of geometry and a group, which holds all this geometry, pretty easily, right? Also, up here in the this top part of the toolbar, so there's a bunch of saving things here, and there's a couple selecting things here, and by default, this one is actually collapsed. And you can tell it's collapsed because it's a little triangle shape right there instead of a flat shape. And if I click on it, it opens this up. These are selection masks. So I can turn on and off the ability to select joints or select curves or select cameras, those kinds of things. This one in the middle that looks like a square with an X through it, says you hover over it and it says select surface objects, and I click that off. And what that means is I can't accidentally select the lamp, because for this video I don't need to select into geometry. I don't want to, and so I want to kind of limit what I'm doing. All right, so when we get started in this file, I have two directional lights kind of coming into this room. And this is a trick I mentioned in class, but basically I have two directional lights mildly offset from each other, and they're not turned on very much. And we do that because it would get very, very flat with them and very direct, where this would be very, very dark and this would be very, very light if you only have one directional light. So I kind of put two in there and I turn down their intensity quite a ways. And that gets us kind of started, but there's a few problems. For one, whether I turn off shadows or not, the result is still a little bit wrong. So this is very, very flat. Even with the two light trick, it's still, yeah, this is brighter, this is darker, but that's it. There's no brighter spots over here where the light would actually be coming in. There's no darker spots over here where the light would have to bounce. If I turn on shadows, then we get this very severe version, and it looks more like moonlight, right? Because it's coming in through the windows. This would be a great way to do moonlight if you also had some interior lighting going on, something like that, but we don't have any of that. And the things I'm going to be showing you are actually ways to light sort of on the cheap. So having not needing a lot of render time, not needing a lot of computing processing power, because technically speaking, if we were to turn on shadows so that the light would only come through the areas where there is no geometry, like this, technically speaking, to make it a daylight room, you need the light to bounce off the floor and then go over here, bounce off the floor and go over here, like to have all this bounce light around the room, and then it would hit the ceiling and then it would hit the wall and it would go around like this. That takes a lot of render time. So I'm actually going to show you ways to get this to look like a daylight scene without all of that bounce, right? So imagine you're having to light for a TV show really fast on a budget, right? So I'm going to go over here. I name them outside lights. I'm going to turn the intensity down to 0. Where's the other one? Is to turn those off, and I'm going to turn on my layer that says outdoor light. All right, so here we have, it's a room, sort of like in New England in the afternoon, the daylight is coming in. And I've lit it with a couple different things, namely these area lights that are not quite the size of the window. I'll go into that in a second. But look how much more dynamic this is than what was just happening, right? We've got these hot spots over here and on the floor, but they're subtle. They're not like real strong. And again in this corner, but like not the deep corner, right? So it's brighter over here where the light comes in through the window, but the corner is still kind of dark. And it's lighter on this wall than it is on this wall. That kind of gradation you only get when you have a decay. Just kidding, I don't have a decay on these. Why don't I have a decay on these? Oh, I guess not. Well, then it only happens because we've got directional lights will light every surface evenly, whereas these actually have to like be within range. So you can see this being a little bit hotter over here. I forgot I didn't have a decay rate on these. I must have changed it. If you want to look, if you want to, you can add a decay rate, and then you would simply ramp up the intensity a little bit. It does change how it functions because it's really close to here. That might be why I decided to against having that in there, because these lights are really close to these windows. The other thing you can do, if you want the light to be a little bit brighter, if you want the room to be a little bit brighter, is turn one of these directional lights back on. Actually, 0.05, just a little bit for each one, to make it look like it's an even brighter day. There we go. So now it's a little bit more towards the middle of the day. Maybe it's a sunnier area of the world. So the whole room got a little bit lighter, maybe a tiny bit flatter, but it's still got the bright, still got the dark, right? You've still got variation, right? This is a big, huge wall. We don't want it to be the same across the wall. We don't want this floor to be the same across the floor. These are the kinds of things we are thinking about as we light, right? So it's just a matter of kind of faking it. And what I really like about this, using the directional lights to fill in, is that it's a lot less flattening than an ambient light. I have one in here just for funsies, but it's not doing anything yet. But if I turn this up to so much as a 0.1, woof, right, I would have to have that turned down like very, very little. But I can get a little bit more general light in here from the direction of the windows with the directional light. And then this would be like controlling for all the shadow, like controlling for an overall bounce in the room, right? So that's 5 lights to get the sun, basically. Because I know I said when we think about directional lights, I said this is the sun, and that's true. However, if we're indoors, technically the source of light isn't the sun. It's actually sunlight, so directional light beaming in through these windows. And it's being caught by this first, and it's being bounced around. And so a lot of the source of the light in this room is bounce light, and we're having to fake for that. All right, so this is kind of the mentality of how to figure this out. Now, in order to move on to my next lighting scheme, if I've decided that these directional lights should be part of this lighting scheme, I need them to go away when I turn this off. And they don't yet. So I have them selected, and I go over to the layer that is for these lights, and I say right click, add selected objects, and now they will turn off. The ambient light I'm going to keep out here because I may use that. All right. So here's our unlit scene, right? So this was our kind of daytime look. You can also get a nighttime look. So for the nighttime look, again, faking something that happens, where if you have a light bulb in here, you get a light shape on the ground, right? You got one here too. You will also get ones on the ceiling, though they are less distinct than the ones on the ground. And you will also get some illumination coming out of here. And I actually did that with 3 different lights. And these ones definitely have a decay on them. So I've got them over here in these groups: tall lamp, window lamp, wall lamp is the short one over here. And it is 3 different lights to sort of mimic the notion of a light bulb being behind this lampshade. Because, again, if we don't have the rendering resources to make this lampshade semi-transparent, and to contain, you know, the light over here but not over here as much, we need another approach. So the first thing I did was I added the lower spotlight, and you know, pointed it towards the ground. It's underneath there. Hey, there you are. And you can see it lights the lamp from the top, and then these spots are a little bit less lit up. And I kind of balanced the decay rate with the intensity, but I also paid attention to the cone angle and penumbra angle. These two numbers go hand in hand. So if I narrow the cone versus narrowing this angle, right, you can make it like a really sharp shadow, but that's not what I want. I want it's going to be diffuse, and it's not going to be super big. You can kind of look at it and gauge, how far would this light travel, right, outside the area. And you can see this one is sharper. So if I go to that lower spotlight, I didn't I changed the, I think I also changed, no, it's the same intensity, but I changed the cone angle, and it's a sharper image. Why? Well, this light's closer to the ground. The further the light source gets away from there, the more fuzzy it would be. The next thing I did was point a spotlight towards the ceiling, and this is a subtle thing, it's a small thing, but I think it matters. Both of these are pretty vague, and that's because they are far away. Technically speaking, maybe I could make that one a little bit sharper, but I'm not sure that I want to, because you kind of reach a point where it shouldn't be that sharp, like I don't care how much closer you are, it shouldn't look like that. I also made them a bit smaller, because this is a bit smaller even if it's further away. The farther away part will be sort of had by the fact that the light is far away. And then the last thing we need is, there we go, if I turn that off, we need the light to actually illuminate the general surrounding area. And so if I turn that back on, you can see it lights the room. I have a quadratic fall off on that one, because it gave me the look I wanted, basically, which meant turning up the intensity quite a lot compared to the others. So the other ones were at 4, this one's at 20. And you can see by turning that up, it's a small amount of light that it casts on some of the farther away objects, and you have to pay attention to how hot it's making things nearby. I'm just realizing one thing I did not do, shame on me, was the color of these lights. These should all be vaguely a little bit orangey. So if I go in here and I change, nope, too much. There we go. I would probably do that only for the main bulb and not the spots. Oops. So it remembers where I was in the color wheel, which is nice. Say done. Yeah, kind of warm up the room a little bit. It's a little bit cold. I think if I made the spots that orangey, it would be too orange, even though it is supposed to be an interior light. And also, that area still warms up a bit because the point light is reaching the floor, right? This is, it is reaching the floor. But yeah, that kind of warms it up a little bit compared to now if I compare it to the outside light for a moment, that's a little bit brighter, it's a little bit bluer. Technically it's a white light, but still, it's blue by comparison. And if this room wasn't so freaking gray, you'd be able to see the color change a little bit more. I'm thinking to the blue room that I used for the basic lights. It would show up quite a lot in that one. But yeah, it's the same 3 lights, an upper spot, a lower spot, and a light bulb. I made a copy of this set of lights, or I duplicated it as a group, and then I put that one over here. I changed the cone angle and penumbra angle a little bit. Did I change the intensity? I might not have. The bulb intensity stayed the same because I'm assuming it's the same light bulb. And then once I set that up, I made a duplicate of that and just moved it over here. So I didn't, reinvent the wheel 3 times. All right. But you can see that adds a lot of shapes, like a lot of interesting lighting shapes. Hello, there we go. Remember we do technically have too much that ambient light. So if we were worried about things being too dark, I am not. I kind of like it. I also like how the light bulbs add a bit of a hot spot on here, so you can see that the light itself the lamp itself is very, very lit up. But those are some of the ways you can think about lighting. It doesn't, we do consider the light source. There is a light bulb in here, but we also have to consider how that light source reacts with its surroundings and what type of light pattern it would create. And so the ultimate goal is to create that light pattern. And we're doing this without any bounce. Right, we're lighting the room without any bounce. Is this how they light movies for Pixar? No, of course not. But they have RenderMan and they have loads and loads and loads of computing power that they can pull from. We have our one computer and our one Maya thing that we would render from, right? And plenty of other places you work are going to have that reduced amount of resources. And even if you do have all of the resources, sometimes you really just need a spotlight right here, so you don't always get things the way you want them with all of the fancy bouncing and ray tracing and global illumination and all those other things, because those are all procedural. Sometimes you just want a damn circle of light right here, and so you would point a spotlight right there, and make it do the thing you want it to, and you can maybe point it only at the ground and not anything else, which is definitely a thing that can happen. So those are a couple different lighting ideas. Of how to think about things when you don't have a lot of render power. Remember, you can stick one lighting set on one layer and then another one on another layer, so you can try different ones out to see how they work. You can kind of do a render pass with either one and see how it goes. And just remember that we want to stick. If we're talking about the midterm or basically anything within this class, we want to stick with these lights that are over here. I know that there are others that are listed here, but we don't have as much time to go through some of them, and we want to stick with things that we can control for now, because whenever I know it's only extra credit on the midterm, but eventually you will be lighting for points, and you want to stick with things that you can control and make intentional, because we don't just want like lights spewing across everywhere. We want to kind of consider the lighting that would be going on in the room at that time.